Revenant has been reborn, and boy oh boy is he spicy. Revenant's brand new kit is honestly some of the most fun I've ever had in Apex Legends. So real quick, thank you Respawn for this incredible rework. To be frank with you guys, my first few games on Revenant had me exploding left and right. I was jumping into people with my ultimate in an attempt to mimic what I saw in the trailers, and unfortunately that led to me falling over pretty much 99% of the time. Another issue I was running into was properly moving around with this tactical. Sometimes I'd go super fast and stay close to the ground, and other times I'd leap 2 feet in the air and stall out. And I guess to better describe what stalling out means, basically I just jump up and it would literally look like I was hovering, just floating there. Pair that with this big hitbox and, well, back to falling over. Anyways, I'm pretty prone to rambling, so to summarize, learning to properly utilize Revenant's new kit took me a minute. First of all, I think we should go over his abilities just real quick, don't worry, I'll be brief. Revenant's tactical is called Shadow Pounce. It basically lets you pounce. You can dictate how far it takes you based off how long you want to hold and charge the ability. His passive is called Assassin's Instinct, and it pretty much makes it so that anybody you brought to low HP is marked for you and your teammates. Along with that, it'll also make you crouch faster and have improved wall climbing. That being said, it does come with a negative of lessened wall hops. Last but not least, say hello to Forged Shadows and say goodbye to whatever the heck the totem was called. When activated, this ability creates a very cool 75 HP shadow shield thingy-mabob around him, and it lasts for about 25 seconds. We'll get into some of the epic saucy things regarding this ability later, but basically just know that it buffs up your tactical itself, and it's pretty dang good. Now, quickly before I get a little bit too specific, I do want to state that we're going to be going over 2 different playstyles for Revenant. One, which is an assassin, this punishment-heavy approach to Revenant, which I personally think is not only his strongest, but the most entertaining. Yeah, literally, I'm going to kill him.
Not kidding me.
And a full send entry frag one, which to me is just a little bit too hard to pull off, and in most cases, a fair bit more risky. More info on these 2 playstyles a little bit later on in the video. Revenant's new kit is best utilized when playing off angles. If and when possible, you want to start fights by poking and being impressive from a distance. The reasoning behind this is that his large hitbox thrives at range where it appears smaller. He has a low cooldown movement ability which you can use to close the gap or continue furthering your pressure from different angles. And last but not least, it's just really freaking fun, dude. Sometimes it legitimately feels like he does what Vantage was supposed to do, but just better. Anyhoomst, Vantage slander aside, here's the gameplay loop. Deal damage, get in there, repeat. Think of yourself as the cleanup crew, but maybe a little bit cooler. The idea here is that you want to spread them thin and make them feel incredibly tiny. If you can put yourself in their shoes, they should be thinking something like this.
Oh my goodness, I'm so scared.
All right, cool. So, once you've done this, it's time to pounce on in and capitalize on any and all openings you or your team have created. Unfortunately, this playstyle can be pretty tricky to get a hang of. My first day of taking this approach often left me baiting my teammates, and I didn't even really realize that I was doing it. So I'm going to briefly touch on that before we move to tip 2. Whenever you're trying to make use of off angles, it is an absolute must that you take note of not only your teammates' position, but also their health and utility. If you leave movementless characters behind, it's pretty much GG for them. And unless you want to get blamed, I would advise against that. As a general rule of thumb, I think you should make an effort to have a triangle formation. This will ensure that you're looking after one another. If one of you needs help, the other 2 can look after you. Lastly, just because you have movement options doesn't mean that you get to bail at the first sight of danger. A losing fight is not a lost fight. Save your team some frustration and just try to win. And if you think I'm out of line for saying that, just envision every time your Loba has left the fight to go craft your banners. Not fun, is it? Tip number 3. Embrace your inner Spider-Man. You need to ensure that you are using that beautiful passive of yours to get incredibly powerful in unexpected positions. It's important to abuse the fact that this ability has very little audio. I've had the pleasure of climbing up on non-suspecting enemies time and time again only to smack them in the back of the head with the Disruptor Rounds PK. And sure, you can argue the semantics and say, but Pathy can do the same, Vantage can do the same, blah 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 blah, but none of those are quiet, as long as we don't include Horizon's audioless self. Tip number 4. Remember how I said you shouldn't be playing Revenant the way he's played in the trailers? Well, Apex is a game of RNG, and sometimes you're gonna have to get in there quickly. Go a little wacky even. So what's the best way to do this? Arc stars and fancy tactical technology. I'll go ahead and talk about the most shocking mechanic first, the whole arc star thing. Believe it or not, Revenant is completely immune to his own arc stars or frag grenades. Yep, I'm not kidding. If you're going to entry and fling yourself into a room, you may as well throw a couple large stars in there. The team won't expect you to fly in with them, and maybe they'll even do a little bit of damage. Now let's cover the fancy tactical tech. And real quick, to be clear, there are two, maybe more, fancy things you can do here. A simple, slightly less effective method, and a banger epic cool method. So the epic banger cool method, what the heck do I mean by that? It's essentially your tactical plus a super glide. I don't think it has a dope name yet, so for now I think we should call it the Super Pounce Uwu, trademark pending. It might seem pretty complicated to pull off, but really the hardest part is just the super glide. All you're gonna do is start charging your tactical, hit a super glide, and then let go of your tactical. That simple. Not easy, but simple. This will not only send you flying with pretty much double the speed, but your weapons will also become usable much quicker than with the default tactical use. Now for the less epic Poggers cool version. But hey, at least this one's really easy to pull off. I'm thinking for this one we should call it the slam your face into the wall and slide like that one cop that went down the slide at a park. Pretty cool stuff. Breaking news! As I'm editing this video, I have discovered, and by I mean I saw a video on the internet, there is a third viable method to entry fragging. And this one, unlike the slam your face into the ground method, actually lets you whip out your weapon a heck of a lot faster. So what do? You see this ledge here? Fall off it. That's literally it. All you have to do is make sure that you slid off the ledge and everything should work itself out. Tip number 5. Learn how to use Revenant's abilities to escape. I want to preface this by saying that you should not be running frequently. I refuse to have Revenant's image tarnished by those of you who are too scared to fight. Once again, just because you're losing a fight doesn't mean you can't win it. Unless both of your teammates just got one clipped by a fully automatic Kraber, I don't want to hear it. Anywhoomst, here's how you run. If you have your ultimate, you're going to want to pop it. When you're in your ultimate, your tactical actually has a reduced cooldown. And on top of that, you get the constantly regenerating blue armor for those pesky pot shots that come flying by you. Just try and keep in mind that if you need to cross a gap quickly, to aim at the ground. This doesn't really go with the whole learning how to escape thing, but I figured why not mention it here. Whenever you're going to use your tactical, I think it's helpful to aim a little bit lower than you think you should. Helps prevent that stalling thing I talked about, and the ability already gives you some height on its own, so I don't think it's necessary to add on top of it. Tip number 6. Aggression equals survivability. Revenant's ultimate gives you 75 health that regenerates on knocks, assists, or after not taking damage for a little bit. This makes you an absolute unit, a raid boss even. There's not a whole lot to say about this, so I'll try to keep it short. Let's pretend you and the enemy cracked each other. What should you do? Typically, you'd heal and reset, right? But with Revenant, I actually think it's a better idea to utilize your ultimate's regeneration time and actually take some space. Obviously, this is situational, but the pressure and space gained can be quite useful. Lastly, if somebody's low on health, just jump on them and get the ult HP back. I know it's a little scary, but more often than not, it's actually pretty worthwhile, especially if it's a full-on 3v3 still. Tip number 7. You may be the raid boss, but you're also gargantuan. This right here is the thing that took me the most adjusting. I kept on ulting and trying to go crazy, then exploding. So here's the thing, you get more health, and that's overall great for 1v1s where you're both going to be hitting the vast majority of your shots anyways. But as soon as you introduce a second or third person, you just become way too easy to hit and get melted. I could be totally wrong about this, or maybe there's a bug that keeps your hitbox huge, I don't really know, but those are just my thoughts. Tip number 8. Weaving in and out of combat. Revenant is incredible for locking down entire areas. During a fight, there are many pauses, especially throughout the late game, and while he has little utility, he still thrives in this situation. Why? It's his ability to lock down a space. There was one fight in particular that I was able to just move back and forth between 2 different spots and gather information every single time. Not only was I able to help my team fight a 3v3, but I was able to take a step back, gather some information, and prepare us for the next fight. The combination of a low cooldown plus resets on assists or knocks is just absurdly useful for this type of playstyle. This may be a weird comparison, but the closest thing I can compare it to is when a bloodhound scans your back mid-fight. I hope that tip made sense because that's probably the most nuanced and hardest to get right, so I genuinely do hope that I explained that at least somewhat okay. Now for some quick fun stuff. Number 1, you can tap strafe out of your tactical. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm not quite sure that they'll keep it in the game because the animation is a bit bugged right now, but for the time being, it's pretty cool. Number 2, Guapi's signature wall bouncy shenanigans. It's still possible, it's situationally useful, I'm awful at it, and thanks for watching.